Today's conversation is about AI. We're going to be talking about its impact on technology, business, and the transformation of industries, of course, like insurance. Now, we're going to come at this from 3 different angles. We're going to talk about the broader tech landscape. We're going to talk about AI's landing in insurance, and of course, what it means for those people building and leading those charges. And I'm delighted to be joined today by 3 people with a sharp but complementary perspectives on these topics. We have Angela Strange, General Partner at A16Z, one of the most powerful and thoughtful voices on fintech and the infrastructure layer of innovation. We have Amrit Sinthirasenan, co-founder and CEO of Hyperexponential, who's been leading AI both within the product but also within the company. And Tom Chamberlain, our Chief Customer Officer, who's working closely with our clients as they roll out AI across their space and also within his organization. But we're going to let them introduce themselves as well. So let's start with Amrit. Over to you to say hello.
How do I top that? I'm Amrit, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hyperexponential. Yeah, I am an actuary turned software engineer I'm a software engineer turned actuary turned software engineer turned entrepreneur, I suppose. And I have been spending a lot of time in this space. You're right, I was the first AI kind of person. I don't want to call myself AI engineer. I could probably get a good pay rise actually if I did that. I was the first AI person at HX, thinking about how we'd implement it in the product, and I am the AI maximalist in the company, as I think it is the most transformative technology in our history, I would say. And yeah, that's me.
Great, lovely, thank you, Amrit. And Angela, over to you.
The Canadian in me loves that you introduced it as A16Z. Yes. So thank you for allowing the only one without the fancy British accent on your podcast here. Angela Strange, General Partner at A16Z. To use Amrit's framework, I guess I am aspiring accountant turned mechanical engineer, turned VC, turned professional runner, turned product manager, back to VC. I've been at the firm about a decade now, and I am a proud investor in Hyperexponential.
Fantastic, welcome. And Tom?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so Tom Chamberlain, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Hyperexponential. My background's insurance, similar to Amrit. I was an actuary in a past life, but I've worked across all different parts of insurance companies, including underwriting as well, which is part of the reason I'm here. A lot of what we do at Hyperexponential is with the underwriter in mind. Very excited to be here to talk about AI. It's got huge potential across the insurance industry, insurtech and tech world in general. So very keen to get into some interesting discussions.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here today. So let's start broad. So let's talk about how AI is reshaping work, leadership, and the business landscape. So we're talking less about the tool, but more about the expectations, the mindsets, and I think how the operating models are going to be shifting as a response to this. So Angela, let's come to you first. So I know you spend a lot of time thinking about and working with your companies on the impact of AI and on how that's going to affect the labour market. So how are you seeing this play out, and kind of what are your key trends you're watching for here?
This is by far the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur, to be an investor, to be working in technology since I started. And there's a lot of different frameworks that you can put around the why, but one of the more interesting I think of, like the global software market writ large is about $1 trillion. The global labor market, depending on the numbers, is an order or 2 orders of magnitude larger. And so if you were building, you used to be building for a very large global software market. Now with AI, your addressable market is the entire labor market. And anytime a market size expands that dramatically, it creates opportunities for new companies, for large companies, and it's just like we're seeing a frenzy of activity everywhere, racing to capture what are all of these new open markets. And I think we're seeing this happen in 2 different ways. Like if you look at how do companies buy software today, like for instance, you buy Workday, it's a $65 billion market cap company. They run a lot of your HR systems, but then you have to hire a lot of humans to take actions on top of those systems. They're emailing new employees to collect a bunch of documents, right? Or Salesforce, even larger, it's a $265 billion company. But you have a ton of, SCRs that are pulling data out of those and sending emails. Now, all of those actions that you used to have to hire humans to take on top of software, those can be done by AI. So the software is just expanding out in that way. The second way is like purely human first. And I think the areas where this is happening is places where there's labor shortages. So take a medical example. There's 6 million nurses in the US. Projected to be a high retirement rate. There's already a gap of up to 1 million nurses. Where are you going to find those people? Well, it turns out AI can do a lot of that job, like not the human job. They're not going to, put in your, IV, but could they call everybody to see, are you going to come to your appointment tomorrow? Do you have the medications you need? Do you have any questions? Like, yes. And so that is an area where a new software company is really starting with a labor first perspective. And both of those areas are very interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think the opportunity cost, I think, is the kind of thing to call out there. It's like, as a nurse, what is the best use of your time? And it's going to be increasingly the things that only you can do as a human. And if you can get an AI or system to it for you, you really should be.
That's the most interesting point. Like, there is a societal debate of job replacement, but I think a lot of the AI is going to enable all of us to be more humans in our jobs and to get rid of the 10, 20, 30% of rote tasks that we don't like doing anyways.
Yeah, totally agree. Amrit, obviously, we've been witnessing firsthand how you've been doing this at Hyper Exponential, as we said in the intro, like through the product, but actually through how we operate as an organization, driving kind of a fundamental shift in our attitude, which we'll talk more about later on. Where do you kind of think is the biggest opportunity or hurdles that we need to be kind of overcoming kind of across the world?
Yeah, Angela's point about the labour market is really fascinating, right? Because I think there's a couple of areas I look at this. I think if you think about the insurance sector, I've always been like quite interested in the kind of nature of the jobs inside insurance, right? They're like I call them like high barrier to entry jobs, right? So like it's like not that many actuaries in the world. Like you look at the accountancy profession, it's hundreds of thousands, right? It's probably an order of magnitude lower, right? However, the skill set itself, as Angela said, like you don't need to be an actuary to call someone up, right? Or to actually document your work, right? And actually, if you think of the sheer volume of work being done by like scarce resource that's a high barrier to entry, so like AI can just has incredible leverage in those sectors. Our clients face this all the time because actually what they face often is a market that's very competitive. It's hard to hire. When people leave, they take a ton of context with them. And if you think about the replacement cost, the turnover cost of all of those changes, they're very, very high. So when I talk to our clients about what HXAI is, I say, well, imagine if you had an infinitely large army of underwriters or actuaries, all of you, everything about every model that you'd ever built, they never left, right? And then you renew deeply, right? Like we can make that. We're making that right now, right? So you think about that opportunity, it's very, very significant. In terms of other opportunities for our company more broadly, I've been trying to get the company to think in like orders of magnitude or like, X times more impactful. I think the natural nature, we were talking about this earlier, the natural tendency of people is to like sprinkle AI dust on top of a task and see it as 15% better. Whereas actually, if you built an MCP server to your data, right, you could actually access the very, very difficult data sets to pull out of a very complicated database in minutes rather than spending a whole day, right? So rather than using, don't get me wrong, it's amazing, rather than using some of these models to access the data by like doing a human in the loop like conversation, that's not what I'm looking for us to do at the company. I think so. Like build a prototype using AI, it should be 1 person day rather than 2 person weeks, right? Think about it that way. Think about like actually refactoring code, making changes this is the sort of the mundane work that our clients have to do, right? Software changes, it becomes more effective, new techniques come out. Like that shouldn't be a 3-week piece of job, 3-week job. It should be a 2-day job, right? Or maybe even a 15-minute job, depending on the nature of the problem. So I'm trying to get our company to think about this in kind of like seismic shifts, not kind of incremental change. And that's hard, right? Like it's a mental model, mindset change that's required. I think the biggest challenge is getting people to go, I was talking to one of our leaders in the company, he's like, if I started HX today, right, and I had no time, no money, no brand, no nothing, you've all heard the kind of Amrit phrase about how HX was born. How would I build this process? Like what would I do now? If I were a seed stage company, how would I do that? And like driving that mindset in is absolutely critical, I think.
I think going back to Angela's point about augmentation and actually seeing it as that rather than actually replacement, I think a lot of people kind of use the term like do more with less. I think one of your phrases is do more with more. It's like, we want to continue to invest in our teams. How can we spend this money? But if you put money into a team, we want to be seeing you driving that efficiency through AI. So we'll put money in and we know you're going to get a 10x return, 100x return, which fundamentally wasn't possible 2 years ago because you just couldn't drive that. So driving out systemization and differentiation and then the efficiency through that.
Well, and I think one of the things to that point is, so one view is, how do I do what I'm doing now more efficiently? Which is good, and there's lots of opportunity there. But it's, what could I do if I had infinite resources? And so to take a very specific example, right? If you think of sales and customer success, right? For your large enterprise clients that you're going after, you would develop like deep research of all the different personas. You would put together a very specific sales deck. And you can't afford to do personalization like that for everybody. With AI, now you can. And so I think it just supercharges this ability to do one-to-one, and you can think of those examples all across your organization.
It's funny you mentioned the customer success side, because I can see that exactly there, right? It's not just going to be about using these tools to help sort of pull all this research. It's just a complete change in the way they're working. You know, their role then is going to be around just delivering the value, not just sort of working on the relationship and building these assets for it. You know, it's just a fundamental shift in what we're doing. And to Amrit's point, you know, this is a mindset shift. Right? This is going to affect everyone. And yes, actuaries will be affected in different ways to engineers, will be affected different ways to customer success, but everyone's role will start to fundamentally change here. And I think that's the shift we're starting to see now. It's not this incremental piece that we're trying to add on. The companies that are doing this really well are starting to just reimagine what these jobs look like. So yeah, instead of having to do all this deep research, that's there now for you. So what does this job become? It becomes understanding how we can use that to help add value to the customer. You know, it's automating a lot of these tasks so that we can not just then allow it to make the judgment, it's just allowing us to then make better judgments ourselves. So it doesn't replace this expertise, it just augments and enhances it. So couldn't agree more.
So really we had like the industrial revolution and the software revolution, but I feel like now actually the AI revolution is what's happening at the moment, and you get that more than multiple order of magnitude step change as a result, because software allowed us to automate part of the tail, and I think AI is now allowing us to unlock like the long tail of things that just, there was no incentive to automate those because it took human effort to build the thing to automate it. But now you can throw an AI at it and say, automate this. And suddenly, as you were saying, Angela, there's a load of things that, the 0 to 1 that couldn't have happened previously. You were taking a huge amount of investment, it wasn't worth it. But now you can just, with a couple of prompts, unlock that.
Yeah, I think to borrow a little bit from Steve Jobs, if you think of all of the different waves of technology adoption, it goes through like 2 primary phases. The first one, sort of the skeuomorphic phase, right, which is doing existing things better. And there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think that's where we see a lot of the activity. And then there's doing entirely new things. And I think that is the piece where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's so much change going to be kind of coming through as a result of this. And I think we're very much at the beginning, just the pace of change that's coming out from the players in the industry, and you immediately see people jump on them, experimenting with them and just playing to begin with, then suddenly some use cases start kind of clicking into place. So it's kind of really exciting.
And then if you go, actually I'll borrow from Chris Dixon, uses this like even one step further where it's harder to come specific examples. You talk about, he always talks about how great science fiction writers, predicted the car. Like really great ones predicted the traffic jam. And so I think we're only at the beginning of where this is going to go.
I think that's a really interesting kind of point, because the conversation we have with a lot of our customers about when the motor car first kind of came into countries, you'd have someone walking in front of it with a red flag at walking pace for safety purposes. And we say some of our organizations we speak with, they actually have a change control process or business management process, etc. And they buy a platform like ours and they slow it down like that for safety purposes. And I wonder if we can have a similar thing around AI adoption, where by putting so many safety kind of wraps around it, we're going to kind of slow the pace of change there. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops out. Which I think is a lovely segue actually onto AI adoption in our personal and professional lives, after we've spoken about kind of across the industry. So, I mean, Angela, let us start with you. So how are you seeing kind of AI adoption and its impact payout personally and professionally?
Maybe I'll start professionally. I think there's sort of two very different trends going on. Like if you are starting a company today, you're very AI native, you've started using the tools, you've designed your company from the ground up with this in mind. And there's a lot of companies there and they're growing very, very quickly. And we'll talk about the sort of battle between the newer companies and the older incumbents a little bit later. Then I think there's an opportunity. Let's say you started your company 5 years ago when these tools were kind of around but didn't really exist. And now you're faced with this challenge/opportunity of how do you take this platform you've built and all of this usage that you have and then infuse the power of AI. And I'll say the companies that are doing that really well are companies where the CEO becomes like chief AI officer. And that tends to be a little bit more easily done if I pattern match across my companies, where CEOs have a technical background. So I'll make Amrit a little embarrassed here, but like, it's very rare where you will find a actuary with a CS degree running a software company. And I think one of the things you did really well was you immediately jumped on Chief AI Officer, right? And so this is a down from the top. And then the thing, and you've probably noticed this in your personal lives, is you can read about AI all day long, but you only really become a believer when you see a personal use case or like a professional use case that resonates to you. And so I think the best CEOs are going function by function and helping their sales team really understand, like, holy shit, like AI can do all my research and write my emails. That's amazing. Like, down to human resources, like, wow, I don't need to like pull documents out of my email. It can just magically auto-populate. And so the more you can help individuals in your functions get that personal aha moment, once they have that, the ball starts rolling downhill and it starts to be brought into your organization.
I couldn't agree more with that. Like, getting that excitement level where people are just trying this out in their spare time, waking up at weekends and going, cool, I'm going to create my custom GPT for this purpose or this purpose. You know, once it's like a toy, but actually when you see the power of it, exactly to your point, then you go, oh my goodness, this could apply to here at work, or this could apply here, and you start seeing the possibilities, and that's when ideas start going. And I very much like the Chief AI Officer. I think that's really a really good thing, because this message coming sort of top down will kind of sort of percolate throughout the organization. And then if you're getting then excited, then it will start to come back up as well. And I think we're seeing a lot of that at some companies, particularly ours now, where there's a real kind of hunger and excitement for what this can possibly do. And that's where you start to make these really cool transformation changes, right? I remember chatting to a friend of mine who's like, his favorite personal use case for his AI was to create bedtime stories for his kid. And it's like, actually, that's a really nice thing. And actually, he got a ton of enjoyment out of that. But as a consequence of it, now he's using it to write all of his emails and to respond to like meeting messages and compile like notes from whatever workshop they're in. And that's just come from the back of, cool, well, what can I use this for now? Actually, I've used it for this and I'll use it for this. And there's just so many areas that you can do it for, both for yourself, but then for also your team. And we're seeing, I'm seeing a lot in the different sort of parts of my customer function where we're finding areas where this could completely revolutionize the way we're doing things, and not just, again, doing this additive thing which we talked about before, not just sort of experimenting and seeing where we could actually just add a little bit of value, but complete reorganization, complete rebuild of the way the function works. And we talked a little bit about it earlier, you know, that there's some huge areas for this, whether it's customer success or some of the engineering or model development work that we do, the learning side of things. You know, there's all of this AI content that you can create really quickly and easily now using all these great new pieces of software. And I think that's the kind of the phase we're in now. Is it's like we need to stop experimenting with all of this, and it needs to be executed embedded.
Yep. Do you have a specific example on your team that's been particularly exciting or useful?
We're going through it right now. So I've been talking to like colleagues in the industry who are, again, they're finding real good pockets of different areas. Like, no one's done it across everything yet, but like finding just really sort of like areas where you go, okay, this we can really do. And so the learning team, for instance, at the moment are looking at actually how much do we need to create sort of voiceover content and video content using actual people. You know, that the software is really, really good now, and to the point where it's actually relatively scary. And one of my team showed me, well, first of all, played me my own voice reading a script that he'd done, because he'd taken a couple of my webinars, fed it my voice, and then it was able to recognize that and recreate it, which is mildly terrifying. But point means now I need to do no more voiceover work for any of the video content.
And this is actually just a VO3 Google.
Yes, I almost sent my avatar to this podcast. 6 months from now, you generally could.
Well, that's it, and that for me, it's like that. There's some game-changing things in there for that, you know. And or if it's just as simple as going, actually, we can get this robot, ChatGPT, whatever you want to call it, to just go and write all the code we do. You know, coding for the engineers, for model development teams. That's going to be just natural language stuff, and we're seeing that happen now with some of the products that we're working on, but also stuff in the market as well. You know, it's becoming, Yami, you say it best, right? It's no longer choosing which programming language you want to do, because it's all just going to be in English, right? You could just get on with this, and it's a genuinely exciting time, and we're seeing huge shifts across the company.
I think something really interesting about it that people talk less about is how easy it is to get started. Like, the activation energy required to do anything, which actually gives you a massive return on the investment so quickly, is great. So on Tom's team is a chap called Jamie, who's incredibly useful, very, very kind of demanding because he's so knowledgeable about insurance, and he's been running these fantastic insurance enablement sessions. They've all been recorded. So last night as an experiment, I downloaded all the transcripts and I built a Jamie bot, and it answers it in I haven't told you about this yet, and it answers in his tone of voice. It will quiz you. It can be a bit kind of like dry with its sense of humor, etc. But you can ask it questions and it responds in his tone of voice in the way that he would, and you can ask it to quiz you and coach you. That took me about half an hour to download the transcripts, half an hour messing around with ChatGPT, and half an hour to generate the picture avatar for him.
And this is great, right? Because this isn't going to replace Jamie, but this is going to give us like an infinite amount of Jamies around the company. So you can have your own personal Jamie on your
Jamie on your shoulder. Yeah.
Exactly, Jamie on your shoulder.
I think one of the really interesting things about adoption, and we've talked about this, is the modeling of behaviors. Right? If you think about our clients, I think one of the most important things that they come to us for is to show them a little bit on how to do these things, right? Like, it is a hard problem. It is a platform shift, right? It's not the, I remember talking to you about this, Angela, it's like, it needs the leader to drive the platform shift. People do not just accidentally find themselves doing this stuff. And I think a huge amount about that. And, you know, we've been talking a lot in the leadership team about how we model these behaviors for our team, but actually showing people about how we, you know, little toy projects like this are actually very meaningful, right? They're very meaningful because someone can look at them and say, oh, that I can think of an analogous workflow for me that relates to Jamie bots, right? Or to, you know, vibe coding, building a little application, right? You know, and the other thing I would say, which I think is really interesting, is I was listening to something recently about the AI interface. And it's just like, actually, we're still in the terminal mode. We're still in the kind of type text in to, you know, on a keyboard into a application, rather than the kind of GUI, kind of multimodal world that we live in now, right? And I think some of the examples you've given, as we think about video, as we think about voice, all of these areas, they're going to drive a very significant level of increased adoption, I think, because different people work differently, right? Like, most people don't sit in the terminal typing text, right? They are visual, they engage in very different ways. And so I think, you know, it's just about thinking very clearly about the different use cases that people have and taking them on the journey, like making it relatable and energizing for them.
I'm particularly interested and excited by voice. Kind of going to meet a prospect the other day. I uploaded the briefing note from our account executive and I asked it to coach me and test me and play out and role play the interactions back and forth. And it was scoring me, it was giving me tips. It was saying, do that again, do it again. That was a B-. I got quite upset with it. I was like, excuse me, who do you think you're talking to? But it did actually give me some really insightful tips onto how I should frame or present something. And it was literally just, I wonder if this will work. And I asked it to do something, and within 5 minutes of conversation, it knew what I was trying to do. And it was literally just, I wonder if it'll work. Yeah. It wasn't pre-planned.
And it doesn't always work though. So I had to spend some time trying to help my GPT understand my voice. And that came about from a meeting, which I thought, I know what I'll do. I will record the meeting notes like by voice as I'm walking back from the city to the office, which I didn't record it for about 10 minutes. And it basically came up with, I've been speaking Welsh for the entire time. So once corrected, it was fine, but it's not quite perfect yet. It's getting there.
Great, exciting stuff. So, like, what trends are we kind of seeing in the industry that's affecting AI adoption and implementation, and how is that playing out within tech? So, what are the trends we're seeing? What are the kind of people kind of saying? So, Angela, should we go to you first?
Yeah, I'll maybe talk about two interesting battles that are going on. So there's the classic one, right? In every technology shift, you talk about the battle between the startup and the incumbent, is whether the startup can get distribution before the incumbent gets innovation. And this we've seen with all shifts, right? I think the AI unique one that's going on right now is between infrastructure, and I'll say that the model companies, and then the sort of customer first apps layer. And I think there's going to be solutions on both sides. But if we take OpenAI, for instance, right, like great foundation models, they've now declared that they would like to be an app company also. They have arguably the most popular app on the planet right now, which is ChatGPT. But they're going to be launching, you know, they've done some experiments in sales. There's rumors they're going to go after some other verticals, you know, and they have the advantage that they're sitting on top of the models. Then from the other direction, we have companies that are coming apps first. And they have the advantage that they probably more deeply understand the customer, more deeply understand the workflows. If it's more complicated human on the loop, they're better positioned there. But we're seeing both of these things converge, which at the end of the day is great for consumers and great for businesses because you've got more companies building towards their use cases.
We kind of spoke earlier about the kind of the build versus buy aspect. People were saying there's a product there, but I could just go to AI infrastructure and prompt it to do that particular thing. And I've seen lots of kind of entrants into the market that are basically a thin layer, like wrapped around some underlying infrastructure, like you mentioned. I think those are the companies that are going to rise up very quickly and probably be the ones that fall very quickly, because there's actually not much actual substance to them. I think potentially the players that actually have a core product that's been augmented and extended with it might do that.
But, I think it's a very important activating question about how can you, to use Angela's analogy, what is the difference between those companies? Right? Like, what's the actual difference? I think about this a lot, right? Like, we never want to get to a position where it is a better user experience for our customers to go to OpenAI and just paste in some renew code than to use our virtual actuarial assistant. Right? It's really important. And so that keeps us very motivated, right? Like, we were talking earlier about having the customer, our model developers, red team that application, test the VAA against, one of the foundation models products. And it's going to be a really, as Angela said, like, it's going to be such a benefit for the businesses, right? Because we've got to stay on our toes, right? Like, we want to be a better experience. And I think one of the things that I see really clearly is that this is going to drive, like, the value will come from how you chain link these things together. So, I think a lot about this, like, there's been lots of incredible businesses that have spiked revenue and fallen away. There are also some incredible businesses that have spiked revenue and then kept going. And you all remind me about this at every board meeting. You keep me very focused on it, which is great, right? But it's very motivating. You're like, no, hold on, Amrit. Like, it's much better to have a wedge to lose than to not have a wedge at all, right? And it's absolutely true. And I think a lot about that for us, right? Like, we need to make sure that every single time we ship something, it actually compounds the value of all of the things that we've worked together to build, right? Like, people come to us, they want our insurance UI components, they want our high performance runtime, they want our data store, right? Like, all of that plus the AI has to be, like, valuable. If it's not, and the AI can do all of those things, then people won't buy our product, right? They'll vote with Ethic.
I see a really interesting kind of sort of work going on in parallel with AI for us, because we're very, very close to the customer. So for us, it's this interesting part about ensuring that our customers are going to be AI enabled with the products that we have, and also just for other parts of their business as well. But at the same time, we're also transforming our business to be AI first, and trying to do these sort of two things is a really interesting sort of route. But again, I think if you're heading down that route as a company where you are really kind of in that mindset of adopting AI, that will naturally go from one to the other. So whatever you're doing internally, you're going to take the learnings and also apply it externally as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point. If we don't get better at using AI faster than our customers, why would they come to us?
Exactly.
So I'd say maybe two things to your point. I'd say about a year ago, there was almost a pejorative term of this GPT wrapper. And I think what we've all discovered is these wrappers, like, there's a lot more to them. So take, for instance, something like customer support. Sure, like, in theory, you could dump all of your past answers into bot and get it to spit out. But do you want this to be like enterprise grade? Great. You should develop an entire eval system around it. You want to do it in different languages. You want it to be multi-system. And so there's just like anything, there's a lot of software to be built around all of these use cases. And so I think there's a lot more durability to some of these companies. And then I think point two to Amrit's wedge, like, one of the best wedges right now is actually voice. And, like, it's not perfect, but it is really working. And I think one of the interesting psychologies that we have as humans is we tend to hold software to a much higher bar. And so if you go into your average call center, and anybody building in voice has spent a bunch of time in call centers, and you get an honest answer as how adherent is your average customer service or average any agent to the script, maybe 70%. Right? And so you get your AI software, it is a lot higher than that. And that's what you should be carrying that against. And so those are some of the fastest growing AI companies right now. And anytime something goes really quickly, there's lots of competition, right? So you can't only do that. But I think there's two pieces that become a little bit more defensible. One is just building a really fast, high product velocity team. And if you've worked with enough teams, like, you understand that actually is very rare, like people that can really, really, really iterate. And then two, if you're on the voice side, you are getting all of the frontline data. And so you become in a great position to build backwards into more sort of system of record-y type things. And so these fast growing wedges, very, very fast. And I think they position you to do sort of stickier things in the future.
Yeah, we've seen this, right? We're going a bit off piste, but we've seen this with the data ingestion libraries. in the market, right? Like it's very easy to, you're so right, Angela, to pejoratively go, this is a feature. It's definitely something people want. And you know what? You're at the top of the stack and people are giving you all that data. Yeah, you've earned the right. Like, where does it go from there? Right? And I think it's just so important, right? And what was really interesting, Angela, what you just said, is it really resonated what you said, because we've faced this problem our whole lives as HX. If you build a product that's good enough or valuable enough that it makes the problem look easy, people go, what's the point in your product? Like, why can't I build a Python runtime? Right? The number of times we have heard, like, no, hold on a minute, it's just a Jupyter notebook. I'm like, you're right. I raised $73 million from Andreessen Horowitz, Battery, and Highland. I've duped them. It's a Jupyter notebook under the hood. Yep. And I'm just really good at sales.
Yeah,
right?
You're a Jupyter notebook wrapper.
And that's right. We're a rapper, right? And you know, that's one of the really interesting things, right? Is like actually, but it's our job. It's not their, you shouldn't blame anyone leveling that accusation at you. You shouldn't blame them. You should go, no, our job is to be better and to earn the right from what we've earned there to make it more valuable to them.
I think that there was a point also you raised, Angela, which was just around the sort of the accuracy of these tools and models. And people forgetting sometimes that actually you need to compare this to a human. Like, this is not about getting this absolutely right. We've talked about data ingestion. You can get these models getting up to like the high 90%. That is way, way better than a human. But the adoption side of people is go, well, hang on a minute, it's not perfect though, which means I'm gonna have to check it. It's like, yeah, but it's better than the human, which you probably should check as well. So there's also that going on, which is like this search for perfection, which it just doesn't need to be. It just needs to be better than the human at it, and it is significantly.
And the rate at which you can develop is so much faster. Like, to retrain a human is a quite a lossy process. It takes quite a while to kind of go through, and you have to kind of iterate across. An AI increment, you could gain an extra percentage point with just a config change, which you just simply can't do with humans.
They work 24/7. They don't quit. They're in a good mood.
And you can reset as well. This is
Don't
why
need to buy them lunch.
And this is why it's prompt engineering. Prompt engineer is now a thing, because you're kind of iterating to get to a certain point, but then you can also reset. And you can go again. It's like, no, that didn't work, and we can go right back to zero and go, cool, we're going to reprompt this and do it this way. So, yeah, I completely agree.
I think a lot of the kind of classic arguments for build versus buy just still apply. Obviously, AI is just another tool in the box, and it's an incredibly powerful one. But fundamentally, Angela, back to your point, it's like people to build the enterprise grade aspects of it is really hard, because you do still need humans, you still need the organization, you need the insurance, you need the kind of the corporate entity around it. And most people, they want to have someone they can blame. They will happily pay $1 million a year, whatever it may be, to say, like, it broke, it's their fault, they can fix it. Maybe they could build it themselves, but they probably don't want to take on that additional responsibility in-house, even though they could potentially do it.
I do think, though, that when there is a platform shift like this, it resets expectations and it puts a really good positive pressure on companies like us to make sure that we're better, right? Because absolutely, all the CIOs of our clients, right, with, some of our clients, one of our clients has a $250 million a year tech budget, right? Like they've got a lot of money to spend, and will be looking at us going, hold on a minute, like, what is the differential value? And that's a good thing for us. It's a good thing for us, right? Like, I tell the team, like, yes, it is stressful, this build versus buy in the era of AI question. The answer is to be better, right? That's the answer, is to be a better choice, right? And that puts really good momentum for us on our product velocity.
I think the goalposts have changed. I think we did a survey last year which sort of asked around a question about is transformation sort of delivering, and the result was worse than the year before. Like, more people thought transformation needs to deliver more, but it's not because the technology is not working. It's that the expectations are so much higher now with what you can actually do. They're seeing these things influence their personal lives in other areas. Then why shouldn't it do it here as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of the CIOs that I speak with, you ask them, what is your AI strategy, and they say you, because that's very fundamental. You've got great vendors they trust already. So why do you trust them to actually adopt this new paradigm and do it really well for you? So we've already spoken a lot about the industry. We've touched a little bit on insurance, but let's kind of like dive deep and kind of focus on there as well. I think insurance is an industry which we know and love, but it does have a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a tech laggard. I think we'll use that term. But we don't think that's the whole picture. Obviously, there are some structural challenges, yes, but I think there's really, really clear use cases for AI insurance, especially around probably pricing and underwriting. So how does the insurance sector compare to other large traditional and legacy industries when it comes to AI adoption? So I think, Angela, you're best placed to start with this one.
Yeah, I think insurance is probably the industry that stands to benefit the most from AI. My joke in insurance is it's a $7 trillion industry where a large part of it is passing PDFs back and forth. Not to discredit, it also supports many global industries. But maybe this would be a good tee up. Prior to meeting Amrit, I thought of, it passes these PDFs back and forth, but kind of more fundamentally to the insurance operation is it was passing Excel sheets back and forth, which is really a very simplistic view of how you started Hyper-Exponential.
It's so true, right? I always used to make the joke that it's a bit like that Warren Buffett quote that if you're an alien looking at Earth, you saw humans dig gold up, polish it, make it really shiny, drive it across town, and then bury it again, right? Like, it reminded me of often what we do with lots of the assets we have in insurance, right? It is a prudential backstop to society. I'm an huge insurance evangelist. I think very deeply about how important it is for the sector. The amount of time that we spend on taking all of these assets and actually refining them, making them useful for kind of one-shot use, and then not refined, and they're not actually making them reusable. It's just incredible deadweight loss, right? Incredible deadweight loss to the sector. So I think I've got a couple of thoughts here, and Angela, I really welcome your thoughts on this, because I think the different perspectives that you will have on the market is really interesting. But I actually think the insurance sector has been very fast to adopt a lot of this technology, far faster than we certainly were. I've grown up probably maybe not quite the first internet era, but certainly the tail end of the first internet era, absolutely the cloud era. I worked through in the sector too. The adoption rate there was kind of excruciatingly slow compared to this, right? And actually, I think if you look at the sector right now, production is hard, right? Production AI is fundamentally hard. So I think we could do a whole show on that. But moving that to one side, I think our clients are pushing hard. They're pushing us very hard, right, to move quickly. And actually, I think I don't know how it compares to some of the other sectors, but as you say, Angela, there's so much lift from actually using AI in this sector. I think the insurance sector I think the insurance market is moving much faster than we've ever seen it before.
Yeah, arguably one of the faster ones. What's interesting in this transition is, if I look at the different speed, it's been more based on geography versus sectors. So you cannot walk down a street in San Francisco without bumping into an OpenAI employee, right? And so that's your day-to-day, or you drive down the 101 and every billboard is call this number, it's the virtual this, it's the virtual that, right? And so if you're around there, it's just you can't miss it. And so even with our startups, we'll advise them sure, you can sell in the Bay Area companies, but get on a plane and go to Kansas. Nobody's selling them and they all want this also, right? And so I think what's been very interesting, remarkably, in the last year, we've had the executive teams of nearly every insurance company that you would have heard of come to the Valley. Come visit Andreessen Horowitz. They want to talk to all the hottest companies. Their board is what is the AI strategy? So I think fast forward a year or two from now, we might look and see insurance has been one of the fastest.
Yeah. And leapfrog other ones maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think what's particularly exciting, for those of us who have been investing in the space for a while, there's, and this is just my mindset shift as an investor, what you do is you come up with a thesis, or you get the ideas from someone, you do a dive, and some of those work and you make investments, and some theses you just decide too hard, technology doesn't really work, too hard to sell, too hard to whatever. And now with AI, I've had to throw all of that out. I'm convinced it's all gonna work. And one of the ones that kind of worked, but not that well enough, was this data ingestion. You think what do insurance brokers do? They basically collect a whole lot of documents, or everywhere. I'm pulling things out of my inbox, and it wasn't possible to do that before. And so then if we bring it back to, all right, who's best positioned to do this? Okay, it could be a ground up new code data ingestion, right? Or, part of our thesis in Hyper-Exponential was maybe it's a modern system of record that already has all of the data with a really cracked tech team that can now leverage what's possible with data ingestion and build all of that around. And so I think that's one of the really exciting opportunities, for you guys specifically, which you're already building.
Yeah, it's been so interesting. We have had this debate at HX for a long time, right? Which is what do we do with data ingestion? Is it a feature? Is it a product? One of the things that we really see very clearly now is if you've got a modern infrastructure like ours, building world-class data ingestion is a consequence, right? And we have to do it, right? We have to do it. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends with all our partners who do this in other spaces, in the claim space, in the risk digitalization space. but exactly right. And I think it's been like a really powerful kind of, it's not really an addition, it's kind of extension of what we do to think about how AI will enable not just Excels to be a medium of interchange, but PDFs, voice notes, emails, all of these things.
And then if you think as you're working in insurance, many parts of your job are very exciting. Keying in, data ingestion, collecting documents, not so much. So I don't know what a more human insurance executive looks like, but I think it means like you're not doing anything about data ingestion.
100%. And it comes back to that point we made at the very beginning, these very specialized, very high lift careers of whom do not go to actuary school or underwriter school to type stuff into spreadsheets, right? Or interfaces.
I mean, it's been really interesting because I've been working in the insurance industry for 25 years now, and some things have changed quite a lot, but other things still have taken some time. I remember talking about automation when I joined my first company, and then found myself 20 years later still talking about automation because it's still not there. And at some point, I'm not going to say exactly when because I'll probably pinpoint who it was, but I watched an underwriting team like literally write something down off a screen on a piece of paper, walk it over to another team who then copied it into another system. And it's like, oh wow, okay, so there was just so much potential for massive improvement. So you mentioned yourself, right? That it's probably the last big industry where you can have a huge marginal effect on all parts of the business, particularly around this sort of automation side. And it doesn't even need to be AI led in some instances. This is very much about just taking away these mundane processes. Like underwriters spend 40% of their time on data admin, which is insane. And there's no way they should be doing that, right? They are adding an awful lot of value, understanding the risk, and that's where a company's IP is. I think actually it's quite interesting because also insurance industries have actually been using AI in some form for quite some time now. They're very big on data analytics, and that kind of level of AI where you're understanding the data, I think insurance companies have been doing for quite some time. I think when you talk about generative AI, yes, it has taken a lot longer and it is taking longer to do. But you mentioned maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, I think it's actually going to be sooner. We've seen such an acceleration in pace, not just from an adoption point of view, but from a company mindset. The CEO Zaffino from AIG recently came out in the press talking about actually they're not just going to embed AI in little parts of the processes, they're going to completely change that entire workflow process, like that ecosystem you're talking about there, so that an underwriter can do the job of 5 underwriters in half the time. So you're 10xing the improvement there. And if you've got these sort of really big companies which traditionally have been sort of viewed as laggards in this area, talking about this, going, no, we're actually doing this now in some areas. This is why I think we're really going to see it. And we can talk about some of the use cases later, but some of these are going to be table stakes by the end of the year. And if you're not an insurance company doing that, you're going to be so far behind because actually everyone else is going at such a pace now. So I think traditionally, yes, we have been, the insurance industry has been a bit of a laggard, but I think that's changing.
That's very exciting. I think there's something we've seen in our time in kind of insurance, you obviously, Amrit and Tom, you even longer, is the drive towards some like standardization. There's always a new standard everyone's trying to align to, and you need to basically get the entire industry to agree to move to a standard, and then it invariably falls on its face. But people have been wanting to connect. And I feel with AI, that's become that universal translation layer. So suddenly data can flow and you need to feed the AI. But I think that's probably the big unlock, is that the data's always been there, but now that layer can translate it into whatever format you need, whatever structure you need. So you don't need this massive organizational change, business change, data change kind of initiative, where I think is going to be a kind of a big unlock.
I think it's such a good point, right? Data is exchanged so many different times throughout the insurance team, right? If you're an MGA, going to an insurer, then going to a broker, then going to a reinsurance broker, then going to a reinsurer, and then go to a retrocessionaire. You've got all of these bits where data is handed off in completely different ways, and you've got the same risk being handled by different brokers in completely different ways. And that was always a massive problem. But now, with how the AI works and large language models, that problem's been solved, and unstructured data or just non-standard data is now much more easily digestible.
I wonder if one of the big changes as well is that because these tools are coming from external organizations, maybe kind of coming from the valley, where small MVPs, iterative development is the norm, and typically projects in insurance have been more kind of waterfall, big design up front, multi-year execution. But because they are external to them, they can do a little experiment, they get a quick return on investment, and so that's great, and they can iterate. So they're adopting it quickly because they're seeing that benefit very quickly, instead of waiting for 5 years worth of development.
100%. I think the commercial imperative, when you can see the results right? And I think this is one of the greatest things that we've seen. I think I've talked about this already, but it's worth saying again, is that the cloud was not a revolution that most people could relate to in their day-to-day lives. Everyone that you know who's got a pulse knows what ChatGPT is in the Western world, right? Everyone can relate to the transformative impact of what this technology can do. And so when you hear the CEO of AIG, one of the biggest insurance companies in the world, right, going, no, we're going to 10x our underwriting velocity, right? Like that's telling you, that's a bellwether, I think, of expectations here.
Yep, very exciting. Great. So we recently did a kind of an AI maturity report, and it highlighted some quite interesting differences in attitudes, like confidence and levels of strategic implementation of AI across the insurance sector. Like, so where do we kind of see the most kind of progress being made? So Tech, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we're talking about the insurance sector, we should probably just split it up into a few different bits as well. We talk a lot about the sort of commercial side of insurance, but on the personal line side, there's a very different level of adoption because there's been a necessity for it. Where you're doing business, which is more direct to customer, there's almost an imperative to be using all the latest technology. Tends to be that your data is in a much better place, tends to be that your systems are much more modern, and things are more homogeneous, so you can actually more easily analyze things, you can more easily automate them. And so within personalized insurance, we've seen an awful lot of things come with AI. I mean, Lemonade, I think not that long ago, announced that they settled a claim within 2 seconds, and that's claim come, settled, money disappearing, and that's crazy. That's really amazing. So when we say actually, as we were talking about in the previous question, the AI sort of insurance has been a bit of a laggard. Actually, there's been some places where it's had a really huge impact already. But you compare that with larger commercial insurers, that's where it's much more difficult. You've got unstructured data, you've got lots of legacy systems which can affect it, and that's probably some geographical thing we can talk about as well there. And it's a lot more around the AI sort of augmenting judgment as opposed to replacing it. Within the personalized environment, a lot of this is now automated, and you don't really need to have that human loop apart from looking at it from a sort of very holistic portfolio sort of area. But in larger commercial insurance, it's much more different. The risks are much more heterogeneous, and so it's more difficult to apply it in those sort of cases. But I think the report also talked about the differences between actually the US and the UK, where I was actually quite surprised to see it was such a stark difference. But I think it's back to your point, if in the US, you've got a lot more insurtechs just locally to be able to deal with. And I think the UK have been a bit slower to really jump on that bandwagon. I think, again, we're seeing that change, but they're also held up by a little more regulation. And it's not to say the US space is not regulated, it is, but where you have the sort of Lloyd's and the London market, the regulation around what you're going to be able to use AI for is probably a bit tighter, so it might stifle that innovation a little bit. So maybe that's where some of it's coming from. But also the business model is slightly different. You have broker-led business quite a lot in the London market, and again, that's going to be quite different from sort of more automated systems potentially which you have in the US as well.
It's interesting you mentioned on the personal lines side, obviously because of the volume, it's typically more homogenous. You have a smaller number of factors to kind of price up your car or your house. Do you think AI is going to drive a move away from that? So you can actually have almost like a cohort of one where you're insuring your car, but because the AI can actually answer across more factors than you would do if a human was pricing it, or more kind of structured pricing tool is doing it, you can actually have a better experience from personal lines perspective because you can now handle many more factors than you could.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that question. I always like the kind of imagine a future where your insurance is just works for you, and you can imagine sort of being in your house as an individual, and you've got your house insurance there, and you leave your house, and then your house insurance goes up because you're not in it anymore, and then you jump into a gig economy car, which then knows you're driving it, so you're now insured on it, and your insurance could just follow you through like that. Now that's entirely possible, and there's no reason why this sort of concept can't sort of go into that more commercial world. Now, are you going to be able to completely automate the underwriting of like a building like the Burj Khalifa in the engineering project? No, but you're going to be able to gather a lot more data than you were able to before and analyze it to help you understand the risk. So you're going to just be able to augment that judgment again. So it's not going to replace all of this. It's just going to make the humans in that loop much more powerful and be able to understand more about what's going on.
Yeah, I think this pushes on the AI driving the ability of infinite personalization theme. And one of the things I think that is interesting, even beyond insurance, is you think of a set of customers that were just too costly to serve, right? And so in insurance personal lines, it's probably the demographic that calls up, needs to spend 3 hours on the phone with you to answer all the questions about their policies. Like, AI can now do that in infinite different directions. And so I think as you look at some of the demand, like demand always comes from where there's huge pain points. It's some of this, right? And it expands the pie. If you've got infinite time to answer all these questions, maybe you can sell those policies. The other thing that's just endemic to insurance is it can be extremely spiky, especially on the claim side. Like, there's a natural disaster, everybody's calling in. There's no way that you can go hire, hundreds of claim agents that are going to materialize like that, and you can train them, but you can turn on more automated, first notice of loss, like friendly, empathetic claims agents. And so I think those types of use cases are starting to get much more adoption too.
Yeah, and you've also on that claim side as well got now humans are not entering into those sort of spaces. They're sending drones over which are taking pictures, understanding the damage, reporting back, and you'd be able to get all of that done without even having to be on site. And again, AI is just massively enabling this.
One of the things I think that's most interesting about, particularly thinking about progress across the world, in the sector, is this concept of like the mindset again. And I hadn't been to Silicon Valley until Angela and Marcus joined the team, and actually you can see the mindset there is very, very different compared to lots and lots of places in the world. And I think when you reflect on insurtech being a very legitimate sector now, right? You go to Vegas during ITC, right? And you're like, wow, this is like, it's not AWS reInvent, but it's not small, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I reflect on is actually how very, very clearly this sector is no longer kind of just an afterthought. It's a very important material, very investable part of the economy. And I think what we're seeing, when I look at the difference between America and the UK, is just that mindset just kind of coming into our American clients just much more quickly. It doesn't mean that their British counterparts aren't moving quickly though. And if you reflect, you were talking about that gig economy, Zego, right? In the UK, were one of the early gig economy providers. They pivoted a lot now, but there's a lot of innovation across the world, and I think it's probably in my mind an advancing front that naturally starts in San Francisco, right, and moves across the world. So I think it's a matter of time actually before we see this being an international inbred space.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is going to move faster internationally, right? And if you look at, to take another voice example, right? You can build the software, and now with companies like 11 Labs, you can have it in 100 languages instantaneously, right? And we're taking all of this unstructured data and putting it into some structured format, right? You can do that you don't need to build a different model per different type of PDF in different country. Like, it just works. And so this software is just distributing way faster than we've seen in other waves.
Yeah. I think the impact it can have on your addressable market and also your ideal customer profile, both of those suddenly balloon, and actually the scope of what you can do as an organization massively increases, as well as your ability to service it. Not with no effort, obviously, but with much less effort than it would be if you're trying to drive it through humans and software.
The thing that I always try to bring our company back to is that our clients, they are effectively a capitalized promise to pay, right? That's why people buy insurance. No one buys insurance because it's fun, right? They buy insurance because it's there to protect them. And when you talk about some of the examples we're hearing today, anything from lowering the stress to having a risk priced and underwritten, right? Which is our mission. But if we can do that, make that much more lower friction, easier, better, more differentiated, right? Fairer, right? That's good. All the way through to the FNOL examples you gave, right? And I think we're going to see a really, really clear leveraged impact on the sector from all the progress we're seing here.
I think the impact that's going to have on the world economy, I think people maybe haven't appreciated. If we are basically the kind of the economic lubricant that allows capital to be deployed more efficiently, if suddenly we can actually price something at a better price point, which allows them or companies to release even more capital, then suddenly the economy can actually kind of grow even more quickly as a result of that, which I think is quite an exciting development. So we've been speaking about kind of AI insurance. There's a number of use cases we're talking about. So pricing and underwriting is definitely kind of a space. It's getting clearer. And we're seeing quite a lot of traction that we've touched on here around kind of submission ingestion and co-pilots, analytics, etc. So what are some of the most kind of compelling cases we're seeing today? I think we're really kind of seeing them actually land with the customers that we have. So Amrit, should we start with you?
Yeah, we touched on it a lot, but I think it's worth, going a bit deeper. The biggest area by far is data ingestion, right? Like by a significant margin. It is the hot space. It's the zeitgeist at the moment, we've got our own data ingestion library, which is probably the fastest growing, fastest Dr. stew in our history by like a significant margin, right? Our sector doesn't necessarily normally like pull products out of its vendors, but this one very, very clearly has. And I think one of the things that I'm most excited about actually is that historically, I think we've seen data ingestion as something where you have some fields and you need to transpose them to another place. Like, that's not the bleeding edge. Like, we obsess about this demo. I've got it on my phone. I give it to people at hockey games now, right? Which is the semantic analysis, right?
Yeah.
Right? Where actually an AI, like HX AI, with the context of the data that needs to be stored, and with our tools, the context of the algorithm that it's being used for, can read a 50-page document and go, I've just read that page of that page of text. It feels relevant to this part of the model. Right? And actually, I think what we're thinking about here is this broad spectrum, like attribution-based, judgment support, which is just a remarkable thing. Like, if you think your job as an underwriter historically, a huge amount of it was reading documents and trying to extract the relevant parts. Now that bit's there for you, and all of a sudden you can spend more time on judgment.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is really, really key. And then I think the other area which I'm seeing very clearly, and we talk about this again at HX at the leadership level, which is the agent co-pilot kind of part of the sector. And I think, again, the jury's out on how that will play out exactly, right? What I tell the team at the leadership level, absolutely one way you should be looking at HX is a place that you can buy virtual actuarial and virtual underwriting support.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely we must ask ourselves the question, why should we not become that company? I'm not saying that we must, right? I'm not saying that. Our job is to do what our customers need, right? But absolutely, that's going to be a really key thing. And so in thinking about some of the things we've done already, right, the virtual actuarial system where, nowadays you can learn how to build a model using Python in 15 minutes, right, rather than 4 hours, right? That's a very clear lift. And I think as we start to take some of these modalities through to the underwriter, right, at the point of sale, again, that's going to be the most exciting kind of application on the underwriting area. And, we're doing work on that side. And watch the space for HX Live this year and you'll see it for real.
Yeah. The underwriter side is genuinely so exciting. That's not just because I was an underwriter. This is, again, it's going to be transformative. Just the data ingestion side alone, right? I was saying earlier, so
40% you said?
40% of time is wasted on just doing admin. Now, even if we can save half that time, there's another day a week to go and actually do some more value adds work, and that's just an incredible saving. But the underwriting co-pilot is a really interesting one as well. So same with us, right? Having a look around the company for that bit of data is somewhere in one of your systems can be frustrating and time consuming. With a co-pilot for underwriters, right? If they want to know, actually, how does this risk compare to another one I've written in my portfolio? The AI will know because it's connected to the database there. If you want to understand the algorithm behind it, which is potentially sometimes a black box on us, to say, well, what's driving this premium? It's well, it's these risk factors here. And again, all this stuff the underwriters could find out, but it's going to take them time. And now they can have all of this information at their fingertips, again, to make those better decisions. And it's genuine and exciting time for them. This is again going to revolutionize the way you do work. This is going to shift you from being this risk underwriter to be more portfolio led, and you're just going to have a more holistic overview about what the business you're writing, and you're just again going to be able to make better decisions.
I think building on that, the most exciting thing, or one of the most exciting things to think about insurance is back to the second order effects. And so step one is to save this 40% of time, which is dramatic, especially with a high priced FTE like underwriters. But then a little bit back to Amrit's point, once you have this holistic view of data, if you think most companies right now, they're broken into all of these different silos, often because the software is built for the silo, right? And so if you're stepping out of insurance, right, you'd have your BDR and sales software, you'd have something else like Gong that helps you do, sort of sales analysis, and then you'd have a different one for customer support, you'd have a different one, and none of this really links. And so if you come back to insurance, like you could have a more holistic view of risk, but maybe you would also know via your, claims agent, who's calling in, who's taking a lot of time, what are the claims there? And so like we might want this risk, but actually they're taking a lot of cost over here. Oh, these guys are like super low maintenance. And then that can relate back to, wow, there's 5 other companies that are working with this other insurer. We should proactively go target them. So there's all new kind of business opportunities that I think are going to come out of this.
Yeah, that's the most powerful thing when you've got the whole ecosystem of all of it working together.
So for all the progress, we're seeing adoption still isn't straightforward. I mean, especially so in insurance. We've seen some successes and we've seen some early kind of failures. So we're dealing with complex systems, high stakes, and a profession that's built on judgment and risk and trust. So the conversation can't just be about capability. It usually has to involve some regulation, some compliance, a lot of legacy infrastructure, and obviously human factors as well. So what are the biggest barriers we're seeing? So what needs to shift to allow AI to move from like a pilot to an actual embedded transformational practice? Amrit, should we start with you?
Yeah, so I always like this question because we talk about AI, but the problem is the humans, right? Like the number one challenge by a significant margin. And look, we thought this inside our company, right? Like it's absolutely the number one challenge is getting the mindsets changed. I've talked a lot about this already. Like Angela, like one of the benefits about being in the A16Z portfolio is that I can speak to some of the best leaders in the whole world about how AI is being adopted. So Angela introduced me to 3 or 4 leaders who are running the AI teams in some of the best, biggest companies in the world, right? And every single one of them said the same thing, and I've talked about this before, which is you've got to optimize to the rate of change, right? If you think about, we're in the middle of an intelligence takeoff right now. I believe that really deeply, right? Every day you wake up and you see like the rate of change. We've never seen anything like this in human history before. So it's like actually conditioning yourself to being comfortable with that and making the most of what that is. But you cannot plan over 3 years, right? You cannot do it. And so I think it's the doing that is really hard. It comes back to what we said at the beginning, right? Posting links to things that are cool is easy. Making things is hard, right? Doing that, adapting your org design, right? This is a hard part. Like actually, we're talking about this at HX right now, right? We have an incredible, tiny, but ultra high velocity AI team. It's the fastest shipping team, probably by an order of magnitude, right? In the company. How do we permeate that across the whole company? How do I manage my AI infrastructure that's going to serve the whole of the product versus the AI infrastructure that's just serving our AI SKUs? At the moment, technology capability, upskilling to the team. You'll get some people, like us who are hacking on it on weekends. That doesn't come naturally to everyone. As much as I wish I could say out of 200 weekend hackers at HX, like that's just not realistic, right? So how do we scale that? Then I think you touched on something there, which I think is probably the least sexy part of it, but probably the most important, which is alignment, right? Like trust and safety are so important in our industry. We are prudential, but like insurance is a prudential backstop to society, right? So what you cannot have is a random AI writing some code or making a judgment that affects the price of something that someone's charged without us understanding it. And I'm not saying, I am not like a risk averse in this space. I think like we can take very legitimately a human-based assessment on whether an AI-based kind of addition or judgment or kind of complement to any part of a model or underwriting decision makes sense. I don't think we could go, just because AI is written it, or I can't trust it. I don't believe that at all. But actually one of the key things is how we build the attribution, the understanding, right? All of these things. Like if you understand like the cutting edge of AI, they say like we start with safety evals, right? Like that's the first thing they say. Like we start with the safety evals. We like try to understand where the model can go wrong. We try and catch that first, right? And I think we're like at AHX, we're like but the actuarial evals, the underwriting evals are going to be very, very important. But actually, I'm not sure about that. Or gosh, that's a difficult subject. Like be careful, you're in a gender directive space or a DORA compliance issue. Like, well, hold on a minute. Like we need to think about that. Like that's the really important part stuff that I think we've got to mail as a kind of vendor providing technology to our clients.
I think there's always some excuses in the market for not doing this as well, which I think are poor excuses these days. Like legacy technology always comes up. It's like, yeah, but we can't do it because this. It's like, I think you probably can, right? Actually, AI is going to help you sort of link these sort of things together. And also there's like the legacy tech can only be so far. There's a lot of systems which have been replaced, so I don't think that's a valid excuse anymore. And the same with sort of data quality. Yes, data is sitting in lots of different systems, but again, this problem can be quite easily solved. I think it is exactly as you said. It's around the culture of the companies. And again, where you're going to see this is where it comes from top down and bottom up as well. So you've got to have the leaders and the management in the companies really, really pushing for this, like we heard with the AIG example. And then with it also coming bottom up, and the underwriters and the actuaries and all the rest of the company also embracing this, that's where you'll get the changes. If you have disconnects at either level, then it's just not going to work.
I think it's an interesting point. We spoke before about AI being a universal translator for data. And I think the point there about legacy systems, which is very similar to one that Angela made earlier about spanning the gaps, is actually if it becomes the universal integration layer as well, you've got a legacy system, doesn't matter. As long as there's a way you can get access to it with an AI, that could integrate any system across the entire org with much less human involvement. And I think the outcomes of that could be kind of very exciting.
Yeah, I think, Amrit made this point well. Unlike other technology shifts, the barrier here to slowing anything down is all human. Like if AI technical progress halted today, it would still transform every industry in the world. Like we already have all the tech that we need, right? And so it's how do you get humans, us, and organizations to see this as a fast-moving opportunity versus an existential threat. And I think I love Jensen's quote, which is, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's another human taking your job, or the company, right? It's not AI that's going to take your market share. It's a company using AI that's going to take your market share. And so I think it's every CEO needs to become the chief AI officer. They need to really help everybody in every department see this as an opportunity, and then we'll get things moving quickly.
And that applies to insurance companies as much as just tech companies. Right?
I think the point I made earlier about with the motor car, the person walking in front of it, the red flag, you could easily do that with the industry and say we've got to kind of be like put so many safeguards around it that we actually stop benefiting from it, or that organization will, and the one to the side of it that chooses to kind of do it a little bit differently and actually be a bit more open-minded, they're going to accelerate past them and do it. So I think find that really interesting kind of balance between the two is kind of going to be a challenge, I think, as well. And I think the point around it is a tool, and like with any tool, you need to know what it's doing for you. Like my background is software engineering, and you've got lots of people who said, I'm using this library that does something magically. That's great until it stops doing that thing magically, and you don't actually know what it's doing for you. And the best engineers I've worked with are the ones that I know this is going to give me a 10x improvement because I don't need to write all of this code, but if it does break, I can actually look under the hood and understand the benefit it's giving to me. If we do end up in a world when AI says, AI said to do this, so I did it, I think that could be an interesting one.
Genuinely exciting times. Exciting for us, exciting for our customers. Yep. Yeah.
So that's a wrap for this edition of Exec Insights focusing on AI. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I want to say a little thank you to all of our wonderful guests here. Amrit, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Angela, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Tom, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Until next time.